Hello and welcome everyone to CyVerse's Fall webinars for 2024. I'm Tina Lee, CyVerse's User Engagement Officer. Today's webinar is on using CACAO for workshops presented by Edwin Skidmore and Michele Cosi. Before I turn over the webinar to them, please open your Zoom chat window and type any questions that occur to you for Edwin and Michele, and they'll address them after their presentation. As always, we record these webinars, and I'll post the video recording to our website and to our CyVerse YouTube channel later today so that you can review it at your convenience. And now I'd like to introduce my colleagues. Edwin Skidmore is CyVerse's Director of Cyber Infrastructure, and Michele Cosi is a research data scientist with the Data Science Institute. Both are veteran presenters of webinars and workshops on topics as wide as containers to cloud, HPC, to the fundamentals and intricacies of using CyVerse for open science research. Both Edwin and Michele have helped many CyVerse collaborators to access and use CACAO, which stands for Continuous Automation, Continuous Analysis Orchestration. And they've applied that CACAO platform for their trainings and educational workshops on topics ranging from translational AI to DNA transposons. So welcome, Edwin, and welcome, Michele.
Thank you, Tina. Okay, so Tina already introduced us, and of course, this is about how to use CACAO for workshops. We've taught other webinars on how to use CACAO for research, so I'm really excited to. We're excited to be able to share this this webinar for you guys. Next slide. So using the cloud for one's own work can certainly be complex in itself, but providing it for a classroom or a workshop environment can certainly bring a whole new level of complexity. And so just to kind of frame that complexity, I wanted to walk through the high level generalized process of using the cloud for a workshop and why CACAO was created to help solve that complexity. Next. So just to, one of the steps, of course, before you can use the cloud is just you have to obtain access. Next. And then you have to get accounts for your collaborators, your co-instructors, your TAs. Next. And then you have to learn how to use the cloud for your workshop and figuring out how to go from, let's say, maybe your laptop to now putting it onto VMs or whatever other cloud resources you may need to use. Next. And then you have to figure out how to scale. How do you provide this to 20, 40, 60 students in your workshop or class and get them to use the same software? Next. And then once you figure that out, you have to get your accounts, the accounts for your students, and then you have to figure out how to collaborate with your co-instructor or having your TAs also use that same, the same software and how you deploy it. Next. And then finally, you could say, hey, I'm using the cloud for my course. And then, well, how do you reproduce this? If you're using this in one cloud or you have to migrate to another cloud, how do you make that reproducible and reusable? So next. So what if we could streamline a few of these steps? What if we could eliminate the time it takes to learn, or reduce the time it takes to learn how to scale this? Next. Or reduce how to even learn how to use the cloud itself. Next. And then finally, what if we can streamline the process in getting your collaborators on board, or even having your students get accounts? So this is one of the primary goals of CACAO, is to essentially streamline much of this complexity, streamline how to onboard you and your users. So this is a very high level process on getting to use the cloud. And so later, Michele will cover a specific use case on using CACAO to use the cloud. Next. So CACAO is essentially, So CACAO is essentially a middleware or broker that sits between the users, who could be researchers, educators, research software professionals, and then connects them to use the cloud, whether it's Jetstream 2 or AWS, edge clouds, or even Kubernetes. And so it's also a platform to help help these users collaborate in using the cloud. So next. And so it does this by using industry standard frameworks and languages that really take advantage of these different cloud platforms. And so go ahead next. And these include Terraform and Ansible and even Kubernetes templates. Next. So when I talk about templates and when I mention things like Terraform templates or Ansible templates, another way to think about this is recipes. So a really great recipe is something that you like to share with others, right? It creates something, when it's done, it creates something really amazing that you want to eat and consume over and over again. And in the same way, CACAO templates are very much like that. Templates have structure. They have metadata that's very useful to people who use them. They certainly have, generally have a name or a title. They have ingredients about like what goes into it. They have instructions about how to create whatever the product is. And then they sometimes have other metadata that goes with it. A really great recipe will have things like, how do you customize it? Like, how do you swap particular ingredients for another that will produce the same delicious recipe? It'll have instructions about how to scale. And it may even have instructions about if you're gonna maybe use different equipment or use it in a different environment. Maybe if you're going to use it in a microwave versus in an oven, you might have different instructions. Next. So in CACAO, templates are very similar, except that it focuses on the chef that really just want to customize it or scale it, or maybe tweak some other parameters that might be important to them. So in this case, this is an example of a Jupyter Hub template where the user just simply wants to, give it a name, maybe change like the underlying OS, how many instances they want that's going to be servicing this Jupyter Hub, and then how large of an instance are each of the Jupyter nodes. So next. So we have several templates. This is within CACAO on Jetstream 2. This is a list of CACAO templates that we have that's available in Jetstream 2, ranging from simply launching a simple VM all the way to, as I showed before, a Jupyter Hub that can service multiple users using Jupyter notebooks, to deploying Kubernetes or even LLM software. So go ahead, next. So just to summarize about CACAO templates, go ahead, next. We have many CyVerse curated templates that are created, that were made for Jetstream 2 and AWS. Next. But these are also, there are also community contribute templates for research and education. Generally, these are created by researchers or educators that have some technical know-how, that are generally experts on what they want to create. But there also could be templates that are created by research software engineers, working in collaboration with these researchers or educators to provide them for the community. Next. And all this boils down to is that, when these experts create these templates, they encompass best practices for creating these cloud resources. And these best practices could be, not just what is created, but how to secure them properly, what are the appropriate resources, like, for example, what's the right storage to use with them. It could also be installing the right GPU drivers if those drivers aren't already installed. Next. They also are shareable. So in CACAO, all templates are assumed to be in GitHub. They could be in a private Git repo or a public one. And so you can share them in that way. But you could also share them within CACAO and say, you know what, I've imported this template from a Git repo that could be private, but now I want to share them to individual users who may be using CACAO as well. Go ahead, next. They're inherently designed for reproducibility. So once a template is in CACAO, users would simply just need to configure whatever the fine customization that was desired by the person who created the template. So if the author of that template only wanted you to configure how many nodes or how much to scale the resources, then that could be the only thing that you could customize. So there are ways to ensure that that template could be reproducible with high level confidence. Go ahead, next. As mentioned before, it's customizable. Next. And it's scalable. Next. And then what this boils down to is essentially that we want to reduce the friction it takes to onboard educators to use the cloud and really focus on how to deliver your training or your workshops as quickly as possible. Go ahead, next. And so at this point, I'll hand it over to Michele.
Okay. Thank you, Edwin, for talking about the machinery that goes behind CACAO. So let's talk a little bit about a real-life example. So let's assume that you are a professor, and you're a professor in genetics and genomics, and you want to do a phenomics to genomics workshop. You have a fantastic idea, and you think of what the attendees require. And all of a sudden, you have all of these tools that the attendees require, going from installing Gattaca, Jupyter, FastQ, Blast, Pandas, PyTorch, all of the requirements and dependencies to run a smooth workshops in bioinformatics. So now you have a large group of people that are coming to your workshop, and you know what you want to do. You want to make this about biology and about genetics and genomics. However, you find yourself stuck behind having to tell everybody to install all of these things. And yes, you may have sent out a bunch of emails to remind people, hey, please make sure to have RStudio installed and you know how to use Jupyter. But likely, and also from experience, I know that, well, participants don't always have things installed, and maybe they don't always have the right things installed. So you spend most of your time installing all of these packages and not actually working on the workshop that you had planned. And thus time runs away from you, and thus you accelerate, and thus you don't do what you wanted to do. So the students walk out of here without half of the knowledge that they required, but at least they have maybe the slides and whatnot, but this is not what you wanted to achieve. And so instead of having the users install all of these dependencies, what if you have all of these dependencies installed in a virtual machine or a Docker container beforehand? And the thing is, you have all of these installed once, and maybe you do spend a couple of hours installing it during your working day, but then you are ready to use these again and again and again and again in one workshop, 3, 5, depending on how many you're planning to do. You can reuse the same images virtual machine images and the same Docker images over and over again. And I have to put it down in a very simple workflow. You would, from the left to the right, create the workshop virtual machines and the necessary Docker containers, run them through CACAO, and instead of having the students or the learners have to install all of these, you can just say, hey, I have something ready for you. Please go ahead and access it through these credentials. Oh, by the way, I made all of this through CACAO. It's this amazing tool that I have discovered and made available for you. And these are true stories because I found myself in multiple workshops where there were a lot of tools that were needed in order to run the workshops. And let's say there was a workshops that had to very much focus on the genomics of things. And you know how many tools there are to do genomics and genetics analysis? I'm going to tell you about it in just a second. Here are 3 examples of real-life use cases. I'm going to start with probably was the biggest one in my head, which are CombBio 22 and CombBio 23. The aim of the workshop was to develop skills in the field of molecular dynamics and genomics, gather data from MD and gather data from ND simulations. It will last for 2 weeks, over 4 weeks in total, over 2 workshops, and there were roughly 60 unique attendees. Imagine having to rush through every single one of these attendees and understanding whether they have installed our studio or whether they have installed the right version of a specific software. It would be a nightmare for someone that wants to just do the science. And we did use CACAO and Jetstream and covered roughly 30 unique software. The outcome of this is that at the end of the 4 weeks, over 2 years, we had collected over 1 terabyte of molecular dynamic simulation. Wow. Another example was the 6 Uppsala Transposon Symposium, and the aim of the workshop was to develop skills around tools used in genomics with a focus on transposable elements. It lasted 3 days, with 1 day strictly working on learning these tools. And this spanned roughly 40 unique attendees. In 1 day, they covered roughly 6 tools, and they used things like Docker, applications in RStudio, and command line tools such as Repeat Masker. In order to cater to 40 people, excuse me, we again used CACAO and Jetstream, and the training throughout the workshop was simplified access and tools libraries, which was, I'm very thankful that everything went smooth that day. And lastly, I wanted to show you ESOL, and the ESOL collaborations and aim for the symposium was to develop a network of environmental scientists giving access to popular environmental science tools. Over 3 days, more than 200 attendees used CACAO. And a lot of people use these tools even after the summit itself. We had to use CACAO, Jetstream, and CyVerse to cover all of the tools necessary and the resources necessary for everybody to successfully learn how to use all of these tools. In this specific use case, users were given access to GPU-supported Jupyter Labs for their trainings, and data gathered during the summit expanded to more than 10 terabytes by users, and after the summit, throughout the entire community, more than 250 terabytes of data. That is a really big achievement for anybody that is in this community. So here's a little thank you slide, which we couldn't have done CACAO without our team. So shout outs to John, Mariah, Jeremy, Il Young, Michelle, Hagan, and Nick, which are here today. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Edwin, for coming up with this idea and expanding. And I am now going to go into a little bit of a showcase on how to use CACAO. I'm going to do a couple of things. One, start a VM for workshops using the VM for workshops template, showing you how to cater to, let's say, 10 people in a workshop, and I'll show you how easy it is. And two, I'm going to do basically the same, but using Jupyter Labs or Jupyter Notebooks. Let me paste this into the chat if people do want to know a little bit more or try to use CACAO. I'm gonna go back home as well. This is
Can
what
you
it
zoom
looks.
in a little?
Oh,
Yeah,
yes, I can. Is this better? Okay,
a
Edwin?
little bit more.
A little bit more. A little bit more.
One more.
One more.
I think that's
Looks good.
Okay.
Looks good.
Okay, all right. This is what will be the CACAO home screen after you have logged in. If you've never logged in, then this is what CACAO would look like when it's the first time for you to sign in. You will notice that when you do click sign in, it will ask you to sign in through Access. And as Edwin mentioned before, Access is what gonna say counts the various allocations that you run through Jetstream 2. So you will require an Access account in order to get some allocations for you to use the Jetstream computational resources. This is probably a story for a different time. I'm going to just put the access, just going to give access URL into the chat in case you want to read more. And let's assume that you are registered for Access and you have an allocation given to you for a specific workshop or a research. How do you get about running things? So first of all, once you do log in, you are able to see the allocations. And these are all allocations that are available to you and have been approved through Jetstream or other cloud computing platforms. What we're going to be doing today, or what we're seeing right here, is the allocations that I have, and I have added these allocations through credentials. I can go to credentials and add my own credentials, whether it is a crowd credential. So if you want to add your Jetstream allocation, you will have to click Cloud Credentials, add your Jetstream 2 allocations, or you can add your own SSH key or an API token if you have any. SSH keys are almost strictly necessary, so get used to having and making SSH keys. But here on the left, I'm getting ahead of myself. There is a couple of things that I wanted to point out. The first is templates. And these are all the available templates which we also maintain. And deployments. All right, I have already a couple of deployments, and these are just in case things did not work out. But let's go ahead and make one. So I'm going to click on plus deployment, and I'm going to click on Jupyter Hub first because it's the one that takes a little bit longer to deploy. This is my quote-unquote launch screen, and I can go ahead and click deploy, this nice little button over here. I'm going to be using the Jetstream 2 cloud, yes, and right now it's the only thing I can choose. And from the project, I'm going to choose the training allocations that I have access to. I'm going to click next, and right now we only have a single, oh, I was lying. We have more regions now, Edwin, congratulations. Last time I checked that we only had one. But I'm going to stick.
allocation has access to, so what CACAO will do is once you add your allocation, and it will look up to see which, what other regional clouds you might have access to in Jetstream.
Ah, I see, I see. All right, then let's stick to the training allocation and the IU region. And we'll click next. All right, here I'm given quite basic requests such as deployment name. All right, no problem. I'm gonna call it CACAO tutorial, getting started with CyVerse, and I'm going to add Jupyter hub. I'm gonna use I get to choose an image. Right now, the only image that I can choose from is a featured Ubuntu 22, which is one of the latest ones. And I need to choose a master flavor. One thing that I learned from the past is that a master flavor does require to have some good computational behind this. So I'm just gonna, even though it's just an example, I'm gonna go for an M3 large. There is some advanced settings, but I'm not gonna go fiddle with them right now. And I'm just gonna,
I'll just mention, like, can you go back to the
yes.
flavors? If you notice, there's GPU instances, or GPU flavors. So what this template will also do is install the Kubernetes drivers for if you select a GPU flavor automatically. You don't even have to worry about that. And so if you have Jupyter notebooks now that are doing, let's say, machine learning, you automatically can take advantage of those GPU instances. And then the other piece that this template will do is you can even enable sharing. So typically in a Kubernetes environment, one pod or one container can only access the GPU at one time. But with NVIDIA's, it's called time slicing. With NVIDIA's time slicing capabilities, what you can do is you can say enable GPU sharing and then say how much you want to split that GPU even further. So obviously you don't want to split it so much that, like in a workshop setting, where your participants can't get things done quickly enough, right? So if you're familiar with what you're doing in a workshop setting, you can say, oh yeah, they won't need more than X amount of, GPU resources. So you can make that decision, but only do that if you're familiar with, like, how much you actually want to split. So, but that it's already built into the template, that the drivers in Kubernetes and how to split it up is already built into there.
Thank you for telling this, Edwin. It's getting better and better. So I'm gonna press next now, and right now I'm given the ability to choose an authentication. I can either choose GitHub or dummy auth. I'm gonna go with dummy auth, and I'm gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because I am very secure like that, and that is gonna become everyone's passwords. I'm gonna click next, and here I have the ability to choose usernames. I can either go ahead and add usernames manually, or I can go ahead and upload a list of usernames that I have. Upload, and all of a sudden it is going to automatically create a list of usernames to use. I'm going to make us admin, and I can go ahead and click next now. I'm not going to enable shared storage, but it's something that you can. And here is somewhere that you can choose what image you want to use. And this is a Docker image, a containerized image. And I'm not going to change this. I'm going to go and click next, and I'm going to submit. This is my summary page. In case I want to change something, I can go ahead and click previous. Otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and click submit. All right, I can now view deployments and see what is going on. And I can see that Jupyter Hub is starting. So I'm going to go ahead and wait for it to start. And whilst we do that, I'm going to create a second deployment. And this one is going to be the VMs for workshops using the VM for workshop template. And very similar to before, I'm going to go ahead and click deploy. Still going to use the Orchestration cloud, the same training allocations, same region as before. And here we are going to give it a name. So CACAO.
Okay. Well, why have you used, in what situations have you used VMs for workshop for your own purposes?
Okay, so in the trainings that I've done in the past, I've used VM for workshops in order to in order to run a genetics workshop, in order to run a transposable elements workshops. I've also used it to help people data mine molecular dynamics data. So it can really be used for a variety of workshops and research itself. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention about this, Andy? Andy, oh my God, Edwin.
So, so what it will do is it'll take an image that already has all the software that you were mentioning, correct?
Oh, yes.
And then it basically makes that many numbers. So if you say I have 20 students and I
Yep.
want student to have their own VM, then it will create all the VMs and assign all the students to each of the VMs programmatically. And it will create passwords for them as well that you can then share with your students.
Oh, yes. Which means that students don't have to go ahead and create a SSH key. They can just go ahead and connect to the VM itself without having to work too much through the jargon of computer sciences. I'm gonna go ahead and create this, and then I can show you what we mean. So CACAO tutorial, getting started with CyVerse and VM. Gonna go ahead and choose the featured Ubuntu, but I also want to show you that if I do drop down the menu, there's a lot of choices, and you can even have you can also bring your own VMs, and that is what I've done in the past. I brought my own VM that I have created and that I had installed all of the tools that I required for the people to run the workshops. I'm now going to go ahead and select a tiny, sure, for now will do, and one student, let's do 2 students per VM. A single instructor VM will do. I'm gonna go ahead and click next. I can go ahead and upload a list of students, but I can also create a prefix for it. So I can just use the prefix user, and let's just say I want to run for 10 students. So this will create prefixes, usernames such as user1, user2, all the way to user10. I'm gonna go ahead and click next. So here is where you can add your own private SSH keys, unless you have already added it earlier to your credential list. You can add it here in case you didn't do it. I'm going to go ahead and click next. You can enable shared storage, which has saved us multiple times in the past with all the data that we had made. Next, and submit. All right, let's view deployments. We have a couple of them running. They're both starting. This might take just a second. I know that it can take anywhere between 1 to 5 minutes to have both of these running. And in the interest of time, I'm going to switch my allocations to something that I've been running or that I have started earlier. Thank you, Danny. Yes, it is really neat. You have to, the beauty of this is that you only have to do it once now, and it works. Okay, let's look at the previous. I believe this is the Jupyter Hub that I have ran earlier. I can look at the deployment parameters, or I can just go ahead and connect to it. What happens if I click on here? Oh, shrizzle, I have a privacy error. Not gonna go over there. Instead, I'm just gonna copy this URL, paste it onto my browser, and I believe it's admin. Yes, it is admin, and I know that I am admin, and I know what my password is. I'm gonna get in, and all of a sudden I can start a server, kick people out of a server. I can shut down a server, and I can do anything that I require in order to connect. And you can probably, if you want to, go ahead and try it out for yourself with the password being getting started with CyVerse. You can choose any user that you want. I'm going to start user 1 and user 2 if you want. I'm going to start also mine and Edwin's instances as well. So with the URL that I've shared with you, I'm going to press enter. And here we go. It already knows who I am. And here, very shortly, I'm going to have a Jupyter lab, which I can use in order to do any sort of science and teaching that I require. I'm going to reload this, and I can see that there is a bunch of servers running. So this was how to launch a Jupyter Hub. I hope that this was easy for you folks to understand how this is done. And I'm going to show you how to connect to a VM now. Going to go back to the deployments. Let me see if the other one is done. They're still starting. Going to reload. They're still starting. No problem. I'm going to go back to the ones that I have already launched. I'm going to click on my VM launch. And as you can see that there is a lot of VMs that I have created, and each VM has 2 students in it. I believe that is the case. No, it's 1 student per VM in this specific case. And I can tell by the address, the IP address. So when you're an instructor running VM for workshops, you have the power to give the students access to these VMs. And the way that you do it is that, first of all, you have to connect with SSH. So I'm going to copy this URL, and I'm going to bring in my terminal. I type in SSH, Cosi at the URL, and ideally, wait, is it instructor or Cosi? I'm going to do both. Let's see what happens. Yes. And I'm in. This is my VM, which people understand ideally what you are looking at. But you also have the possibility to cat or concatenate or show a very special file. Inside opt, you're going to find, amongst other files, a CSV called student assignments. And if I were to print that to the terminal, I now have a list of usernames, which people can use as their username login, a password, and a specific address that people can use in order to log in. I'm going to go ahead and copy this and put it in the chat if anybody wants to play around. Why can't I send? Yes, I can't send it. Why not? Oh, hold on. Let me just send 5 at the bottom. There we go. Please do copy that and paste it in a more legible CSV perhaps, or a text file for you to understand what's going on. But let me show you how to connect using I'm going to use user 1. I'm going to make this slightly bigger. I'm going to type in SSH. I know that I want to use user 1, so I'm going to go ahead and type in user 1 at. And right here at the end, I know that I have to copy this address and paste it. And I'm going to press enter. I'm going to press yes to the fingerprint, and then it asks for the password. Now, we have already been given a password, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy it and just press enter. And now I am inside the student VM. Here I am the instructor. Here I am the student. Now, this has saved so much time in the past because you don't have to explain to people what an SSH is or how to create an SSH key, where you have to add it, where you can get a VM, how to install things. So it really is an incredibly powerful platform. And by all means, I hope that you can find a use case for yourself in order to use in the future. I'm not going to be doing any computation right now, but I do
Michele,
want to...
one sec.
Yes.
Can you talk about how the desktop as well?
Oh, yes. Okay, so there is a small little thing called a VNC over here. And what it allows you to do is that through something called SSH tunneling, which you can see right here, you can get access to this machine via you can get access to the desktop of this machine via SSH tunneling, meaning that the students can then point and click. And that is something that perhaps users may need in order to do some, in my case, some protein folding viewing, or for people that are not used to using the command line, this is a great way for giving them a desktop, a clean desktop that they can then use through their mouse. Anything else you want to add about that, Edwin?
I was just going to say that every student will have their own desktop too. So it
Oh,
goes directly
yes.
to their home directory.
Okay, and with all of that said, I wanted to check if the deployments were done one last time. One of them is active, the VM's errored. It's always gonna be like that when you do live coding or a live demo. With that said, I wanted to go back to the thank you slide, and by all means, if you do have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or paste it into the chat. This was CACAO for workshops and showing you how easy it can be in order to start up machines for your students. Danny does have a question. So even if you put multiple students on the same VM, can they each get their own desktop? Yes, they can. The resources will be shared, but they will both get their own desktops. I think I can show you, for example, I'm gonna make this slightly larger. As you can see, then here we have a single VM with 149, 165, 172, 197, same over here. So this is the same machine, but then the port used is different. So one student will connect to port 5906 and one student will connect to port 5907, meaning that they will have two different desktops to use. I hope that answers your question. Oh, it really is.
I have a question. When you guys spoke earlier, you've used it for groups as small as, 10 students and up to 200. Is there sort of an optimal size, or is there an actual limit in how many students could access either VMs or deployments through CACAO? Just so we don't wonk the system too badly if there is an upper limit.
It may depend on the template itself. So VMs for Workshop will scale linearly, meaning like you can just keep on creating VMs, though you might want to be careful about how many students you put per VM. So there was a setting that said, how many students per VM, and Michele picked 2. So depending on the size, you might not want to put like 10, like, if it was a tiny, you might not want to put like 10 students on a tiny. So on let's say for the Jupyter Hub template, where it's basically a template which allows you to host multiple Jupyter Lab notebooks. Again, you might want to think about like how many nodes, like how many worker nodes you want, how many participants you want, and then what you're running. So if you're doing, let's say, a GPU analysis, like a GPU workshop, then you will want to think about how you're going to have how many students per GPU, if you're splitting it, for example. So there are going to be considerations, and that really will be driven by the template you're doing, what type of exercises you're going to be doing, things like that. So there's not a straightforward answer, and that's certainly probably an area that we could do, better on. We do have tutorials in the Jetstream documentation about how to create, but it's not an easy answer to say, like, depending on the workload you're going to do,
Right.
what's the sizes. So that's the type of thing I would say, reach out to us, and we could probably give some guidance. But yeah, so it will depend.
Okay, great. I think that's a really useful hint, which is reach out to us if you have any questions about how to provision your workshop appropriately so that you minimize that onboarding. Are there any other questions for Edwin or Michele? Okay. All right. Well, gosh, guys, thanks so much. That was really fabulous as far as showing how easy it is to scale CACAO for a workshop and really make provisioning them easy using the templates and everything. And then I guess if people do want to actually add their own template, they should contact you as well, right?
Yes, and I would say we're happy to work with you to add templates. As I mentioned before, usually it's people who are creating these templates have an idea, or they're experts in what they want to accomplish. So sometimes it's not always easy to, like, create a template, because you do have to learn something like Terraform and Ansible to help do that. And we're happy to work with you to do that. So if you have an idea like, hey, I already know how to use the software, and I want to figure out how to scale it. We've scaled other things as well. So just reach out, and we're happy to collaborate.
Excellent. Thank you, Edwin. Thank you, Michele. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Please do join us next week, a week from today, at the same 10 a.m. slot. It will be a webinar given by Michele, continuing on in our Getting Started series. And this one will focus on CyVerse features for sharing permissions and teams. So please do join us a week from today, and we'll see you then. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.